Hello, my name is Abby Slattery, and I will be preparing the Applied Management Plan for Dr. Suggs Iberville Parish property. It's just a quick outline, be going over objectives, description of the property, scope of the services, action plans for the objectives, and a concluding statement. Here are the objectives, like Dr. Suggs requested, and an additional one, hydrology. They'll either call for action or no action. So property is located east of the Mississippi River. It's defined by swales and ridges. And the hydrology of the property is not natural due to the history of flooding and land changes made from agriculture and recreation. So there's a canal called the 80th Armpit right here, bordering the northeast end of the property, and 3 ponds that measure less than an acre each in size. Also 3 pizza slices, what we call them, artificial levees. There's also pastures, and pasture 2 was previously a sugarcane field. And they're actually higher in elevation due to the previous row crop agriculture. Trees are the most abundant organism, just as bottomland hardwood forest is the largest area. There's also a lack of walkable areas on the property and just one road entering the property on pasture 1. So here is my official scope of services. Not every plot on the property was able to be measured unfortunately, due to time constraints, but Dr. Suggs is already aware of this. So this basically says I'm gonna give you actions of what I think that you want and then give you alternatives as well. So here are just a few of some of the cool and common species on the property. And we found terrestrial animals, aquatic animals, and plants. We found deer the most. We found 63 deer, a lot of green frogs, alligators. Dr. Suggs should be aware of around most of the ponds and armpit, and then a few fish, and then lots of different types of plants that are good for a lot of our objectives. Like wetland indicators, pollinator species, and mass producing plants. And then here shows some problem areas on the property, like trash. Trash is a big problem, and especially this large area is actually a quarter of an acre large. So this action is recommended. We say yes to wildland with recreation. So we want to maintain and create new trails. As you can see here, we picked them based on picturesque and wildlife hotspots. So these can obviously be changed if Dr. Sugg wishes, but this is what we are proposing. We also want to get rid of all the trash, and we want to emphasize that the land already has adequate wildlife and habitat for hunting, fishing, and wildlife watching, but we can do better. And alternatively, besides these actions, we can also promote wild turkey habitats since they're a roosting in species for hunting and viewing. So we didn't find any wild turkeys, but we know that this property supports their habitat. So then we also looked at land change between 1941 and 1965. In 1941, we can see that there was natural flood patterns and dense vegetation. But in the pasture, you can also kind of see that there are planting. Then in 53, there's land cover is just less dense. There's more visible lines in the pasture. And in 57, we can clearly see that the rows in the pasture are for sugarcane, and the forested areas look even more altered, and we're not really sure what these structures are right here in Oak Alley. And then 65, the hydrology and cover density has changed significantly. And so just in a short amount of time, you can see how much humans have disturbed this piece of property in the past. So I just want to kind of show you that there are not many easements near us. They're mainly in the northeast edge of Louisiana, but there is a sufficient number of wetlands to suggest on the property that you could still be accepted into a program. But there really aren't many in the area. So we are recommending this. We want you to apply for one of these programs, either CRP, WRE, or EKIP. If not, mitigation banks or WRP are good if you don't get accepted or interested in these 3 programs. And then we also looked at the trees. So we use these measurements to determine all of these things and all of these things. Basically help us determine if we can sustainably forest trees on this property. So sugarberry was, as you can see, found way more than any other species on the property. Also good to note, light interception is very varied. There's also a lot of dead trees commonly found on the property. And then when we found Q factor, because of our calculation, we found relatively low advanced regeneration in some areas, but there was not an even distribution of this. So here you can see in the elevation of the property, it's higher in the pastures and higher at the pieces slices, and there's also 3 different types of soils. And so we do recommend sustainable forestry. There's lots of trees present on the property that are commercially important southern hardwoods, like sugarberry. It's the most abundant and it's a perfect species to start with. We also want to recommend to let the light shine, but not too much. We want to let light in, but we also want to make sure that the diameters of the trees are thick. So we want to make sure that not all the branches of the trees are cut. We want to keep some leaves to make sure that all the trees are getting food. We also would say to avoid artificial plantings and level out irregular areas of elevation, as well as remove the dead trees. Alternatively, I would say you can try artificial plantings, maybe in the pasture. So here we can see the distribution of American chestnut and black walnut. It's not anywhere near us, so this action is not recommended. It's not in our natural, it's not like the property is not in the natural distribution of the species, so we just cannot suggest that the species is suitable for the property. So alternatively, we would say sell sugarberry. We got a lot of it. Or if you want an edible tree, something that produces edible seeds, I would say restore pecans. Also, we found lots of deer and deer beds. And deer found around the edges suggest movement around the surrounding properties. And then we calculated HSI, and which helped us find that the carrying capacity of the property is 19 deer. And so camera trap evidence, as seen in this picture of one of the deer, all the deer are pretty healthy and normal. And then based on the RoboPol evidence, we found that the density of foraging material was most dense near the pizza slices. And then there was a variety of mass producing species. And this is recommended. We would also say to have a food plot on pasture 1 and to stop mowing for more bedding sites, and to add hunting stands for a better recreational experience. And if not in pasture 1, we say alternatively planted in pasture 2. And so black bears, we wanted to show here where their current distribution is, and You can also see their historic range. Here are some of the things that they like in a habitat. This is not recommended. It's not, we are not in this property is not in the current distribution of the species. And the habitat is too interfered by humans. It's too close to roads, it's too close to businesses, and it's just not a big enough area for the bear to sustain a suitable lifestyle. And the trees are also in general not mature enough to sustain them either. So we wanted to say, if you were upset that you couldn't get a Louisiana staple, maybe try another crawfish habitat. Lastly, I want to talk about hydrology. That not pictured is the 80th armpent and drainage structures, which I'll talk about later. Here, ponds in the armpent. And I'm not going to go into much detail about this. I'm over time, but I did want to say that there's a lot of room to improve these ponds and the armpent, and that fallen timber should be removed from the ponds, and they should be dug deeper, because also we found wetland indicators, and wetland indicators determine a wetland's health and sustainability. The property is generally very muddy. That's a indicator. Swollen buttresses are, standing water. And we found varying amounts and types of indicators around the property. And here are some of those structures I talked about, that they vary in material made and condition. And so we're going to say, yes, we want to do this action. We want to expand the depth and parameter of the ponds. We want to level old canals to distribute the flood water better. And we want to renovate and add drainage structures, like I said, to make sure that places aren't flooded too much. And alternatively, we would say you can add water control structures, but they tend to require more maintenance. In conclusion, this is what we recommend, and this is what we do not recommend. We recommend most of the objectives, except selling black walnut, restoring American chestnut, and promoting black bear habitat. Thank you.